Welcome to the Alphagenix Podcast, where every week we talk to incredible guests from around the world of biohacking, well-being, men's health, and more. Here's your host, co-founder of Alphagenix, Ross Tompkins.
Well, I'm delighted to welcome today's guest all the way from New York, men's health coach, Troy Devlin. Welcome, Troy.
Ross, thank you so much, and I am delighted to be here.
Myself as well, delighted you're here. We've obviously not known each other for very long, but the first conversation that we had, I was blown away with your depth of knowledge and love the consultative approach that you take to men's health. And I know that's going to be something we touch on today. But I guess a great place to start is at the beginning. You know, who is Troy and how did you end up where you are today?
Sir, that's a loaded question, and we probably don't have enough time, on this podcast. But yeah, Ross, I'm definitely I am a person on a healing journey. I'm an empathetic human, before I'm a coach. So most of us coaches, they say that we are our first clients. So usually we kind of have to go through our own trials to learn the tips and tricks and ways of managing certain things that I feel like a lot of people in our community, and that's men's health. Some people are struggling with some things, and they may feel stuck there now, but they don't have to stay there. And so I consider myself a bit of a mindfulness guide. And as a guide, what I do is I help to hold the light. Imagine being in a dark place where you can't see and you're not really sure which way to go. Let's say you're in a dark room and you don't know which way to go because you might bump your shit on some furniture. Well, if you had a trusty guide with you to hold the light, it might make that journey a little less painful, a little bit smoother, and a little more efficient for you. So that's kind of what I do, or that's what I aim to do for people. And it's all about asking questions. And a question I have for you, Ross, would be like, what are some maybe challenges that your community is facing right now? Like, what are some things maybe that you're noticing?
That's a really great question. I think most people will struggle with similar issues. I'm quite happy to use myself as an example. I find getting in the gym relatively easy. I like exercise. I enjoy it. I know what the benefits are. However, I am challenged by my dietary choices. I know I know what I should be eating. I know all the research behind it. I talk about it every day. And yet, do I make the right choice every day? No. So that is a common one. We could, and I'm quite open about that with myself, and we see that with many of our gentlemen. But for some guys, it will be, I know I need to exercise, but I haven't found the right exercise for me yet. And that's an important point, which I'm sure you'll echo this sentiment that it's one thing to lecture people on what exercise is good for them, but they've got to enjoy it, otherwise they won't do it. So that's another area as well. But there's probably enough questions and things we can get into from that.
I know there's so much. There's so much there. So you touched on nutrition, and I feel like that's very important. And I agree with you that nutrition is an area that we all perhaps even struggle with. I hate to say that we struggle with it, but it's a challenge. And I feel like it's a challenge that maybe we can touch on that to provide value for our community. And I would go so far as to say that I feel nutrition goes beyond what's on the plate. And what I mean by that is that we tend to think of nutrition as what we're eating, on the plate nutrition. And, it helps to really have an understanding of macronutrients. And on my personal journey in the beginning, when I was younger, I lived on boxed food, right? Like boxed food. Nowadays, we could call it ultra processed food. So imagine the results living on that type of food. But with education, you mentioned that the availability of knowledge these days you can look online and you can find out exactly what you have to do. So why do we still struggle? And And what I feel may be a reason is that if you consider off the plate nutrition and the types and things that nourish us besides food, then we get into the realm of things like emotions, right? Now, is it possible that if there's a problem with nutrition, that maybe there's an underlying emotional problem that is causing us? Because we ask the question, like, if I know I shouldn't eat this, well, then why am I eating it? Mm-hmm. And I feel like sometimes those challenges can be emotional. And that brings up, you mentioned, the consultative approach and why that might be something that someone may want to consider. And, I would go out on a limb and say that when it comes to something like weight loss, which I feel is a challenge that our community faces, if you're considering weight loss and how to develop or how to find a sustainable approach where it's not just like you lose 10 pounds and then you gain it right back. Like, how can I do this for the rest of my life? I heard that maybe therapy is a better way than actually diet and exercise. And it's because of the fact that nutritional problems often have an emotional root cause. So as a coach, we can tell someone exactly what they have to eat. We can tell someone exactly what to do. But if we don't address the root cause, what happens if we don't address the root cause, Ross? How many times have you seen people struggle with this in your community?
Yeah, you just bounce straight back. And you raise a really great point, because I know one of the things that when I'll go, I'm just going to eat it anyway, will be procrastination. I've got something to do. I know that it needs to be done. And all of a sudden, it's far more interesting to go and eat some banana bread, or something like that.
Yes, it is. So why is it so easy to go eat the banana bread? Is that banana bread almost like somehow running on a program somewhere in your mind? It's almost like it's calling to you.
Exactly right. Yeah. And I think there's lots of these little sub-programs, as you say, triggered by emotion or certain things that happen in our life. Emotional eating, I think probably a lot of people maybe have come across that term before, but they're stressed, they're worried, they're anxious, low mood. I know if I go back to the beginning of my sort of health journey, if you like, when
Yes, please.
my hormones were really out of balance, I had very little of my own natural energy. I would crave sugar because that was the only real energy boost I could find. And I was eating chocolate bars and I was drinking sodas, and that was getting me through the day. But I think some of that remained as like a path, if you like.
Well, you touched on a few things there, Ross. You touched on the sugar problem. Sugar isn't bad, right? It's just a thing like anything else. But when we overdo it with the sugar, then there can be downsides to that. There's side effects to that, if you will. Ross, you also mentioned what we could call hormonal health. And this is something that really you can only find out via blood work. But if someone came to me and they asked me, hey, I'm thinking about starting a fitness program. I want to sign on as your client. How can I get started? There's two things I would tell them to do. One, I would tell them to keep a food journal so that I can get a snapshot of what they're currently doing. And two, I would tell them to get some blood work. And that's so that they could get a snapshot of some important biomarkers in their blood, like those blood sugar levels, like you mentioned. Also, like blood fats. It's very important that they have an idea of what their hormonal profile looks like. If someone's hormones are out of whack, let's say we're talking about men's health. If a person has low testosterone, think of testosterone as a catalyst, right? And so your body's repair processes are going to function whether you have high testosterone or very low testosterone. If you're living, your body will continue to function and it will repair itself. However, if your hormone levels are low in that regard, the process is going to be very slow. So if you could address that problem, then it would be like accelerating your progress. It would be very beneficial. Also, in terms of being able to actually measure progress and being able to look and see actual improvements, that's another reason why you want to get that blood work done, because you can see your blood fats are going down. You're making progress there. Let's say you're getting your blood sugar under control. It feels good to actually take control and responsibility of your health and start to realize that you are responsible for you, and you can change these things. You can take a look at them, and it's sort of my job to create the space for you to be able to take a look at something. Sometimes it's hard to take a look at things, right? It's hard to get that. It sort of feels like a pinch when we realize that maybe our levels are out of whack. But it is within your control to change that, and you can go about it in a mindful way that is sustainable and can ultimately really change your experience in a beneficial way. We only get one.
We definitely do, and I'm reminded of a quote that we hear a lot, and we use it in different aspects of our life, whether it be business or health. But what you measure improves. If you don't know what your biomarkers are, how can you possibly improve them? And in business, if you're not measuring the right KPIs, then generally those things won't get better. So really, really important, that we know what our baseline is to start with. But how did you end up where you are now with this consultative approach, with this almost counseling air about your personal training and health coaching? Because that's not the typical thing you expect, with a PT. I think most people, if you said, what do you envisage, it's someone shouting at them to do one more burpee or whatever until they feel a bit sick. No, you're clearly not doing that.
That's correct, Ross. And that approach works for some people. Some people really need that almost authority figure standing over them, cracking the whip, so to speak, yelling at them and making them do things. But something that I believe very strongly in is the concept of Bioindividuality. And that means that we're all very similar, like a fingerprint or a snowflake, but we're not exactly alike. And so that yelling at approach is not appropriate for everyone. And sometimes people are resistant to new information. And so what I've found is that the information must be presented to them in such a way that it bypasses the ego. So we all have this thing. It's called an ego, and it doesn't have to be bad. It's just a thing. It's almost like armor that you put on when you go out into the world, and it helps to protect, our image of ourself. And sometimes that ego can prevent people from even considering any new information that comes in. So someone can come to me and ask how to lose weight. I tell them to get blood work. I get their food journal, and I read the food journal. I go over it with them, and I say, hey, I'm noticing that you're doing these things every single day. And what I find, Ross, is that if someone is like overweight, it's not because they're not doing something. It's because they are doing something that they need to stop. But without going down a rabbit hole there, just I'm like, yeah, I forgot what I was talking about. No, I'm kidding. It's about the ego and the resistance. So I can find something that if someone stopped doing this thing, they would make incredible progress. And when I point it out to them, or I try to just like mention it, or if, hey, if it's like time sensitive, I'll just tell them. And what you can find sometimes is that they are so resistant to just even considering the fact that they might be doing something that is blocking their progress. And that's called the ego. The ego does that. We all have it. Mm-hmm. So what I have to do is I have to tactfully find a way around the ego. And so I mentioned before that I consider myself a mindfulness guide. What I do is I hold the light, or I illuminate, or I get the client to notice something or to look at something. And it can't come from me. It has to come from the client. All I can do is I can hold the light and shine the light on something so that the client goes, oh. And then, one of the ways that we can do that is by asking questions. So you try to ask good questions, and the questions that I ask are centered around three things. It all comes back to your mindset, the meals, the stuff you're putting in your mouth, and finally, like you mentioned, the workout, that's movement. Human beings were not designed to sit all day, every day, like many of us do. So, we encounter some problems there. And most of the time, when there's a problem with someone, especially with their weight, it's because of what they're eating. And it's hard to approach that head on. So in the consultative approach, you ask questions so that the client comes to conclusions on their own, and then we can discuss them. And what I find, Ross, especially with people who are in good shape, they're fit, but they still, they feel like maybe they're struggling. You mentioned rumination earlier in our conversation, and I feel like maybe that's something that we all struggle with. Rumination is unhelpful thinking, or it could even be thinking without thinking, which we can get into that in a little bit if we have time. But 3 things: mindset, meals, and movement. And that's where I try to guide the conversation, because that's what's within my scope of practice. Yeah. And if we can get around that ego, then sometimes we are able to shine the light. The client can get a light bulb moment, and that's what we're looking to do.
Love that. Yeah. The ego, as you say, it's not good or bad. It just is. And it is there, I think, as a shield, as a defensive mechanism. But sometimes it's not always helpful, because it can resist too much and sort of push back. So you say, I think you should do this. Oh, who do you think you are? It sort of kicks in. It's like a little voice.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've got mindset, we've got meals, and we've got movement. So it's like almost like a trifecta.
Sure. If I was showing it to you, it would be a triangle.
Yeah.
I love the 3-part presentation. I love the concept of the visual of the triangle. Yes, sir. It's like you read my mind, Ross. Serendipity.
Do you find that you have to address every element with every client, or do you find? No, sorry, go on.
Oh, sir, I love what you said. Do I have to address every element with every client? Because there are so many. It's what we refer to as multi-dimensional health, all of the various different things. I'm sorry to jump in. Please continue.
No. I think you're about to answer my question anyway. So, is it you find one of them that is more of an issue, and then that becomes your focus, or do you always bring it back to this more holistic way of looking at someone?
Sir, I've been racking my brain to try to distill down my message to your audience to try to provide value for them. I know I have a short period of time, so it's like, how could I do that? So yes, I do have a common theme that I tell everyone, and that is to go to nature. I'm not the expert. I'm a humble farmer. I'm still on my own healing journey. I'm doing my best, but I don't have all the answers. I don't know. I'm still practicing on myself and finding out what works. So I'm not comfortable telling other people what they should do, how they should feel, how they should think. I can really only share my stories. But at the end of the day, Ross, I feel like very good general advice is to return to nature. Go to nature. Nature has the answers. There's ancient knowledge there. Nature is the best teacher. I've studied under a lot of great teachers. Nature is the best one. And that would be the overall message.
Yeah, I love that. And I think there's probably nobody watching this that would disagree that it's a visceral feeling that you get when you do step into nature. Everyone, I think, gets that same, they just feel more relaxed, more at peace. You hear people say it all the time when they go on holiday. They're like, oh, it was so nice to unwind when I was on holiday. But what they don't necessarily realize, it was because they were on the beach or because they were in the mountains. And actually, it's that closeness to nature that made them feel that way, not just turning off their phone, because they probably wouldn't get the same response as if they were still in their apartment in the middle of New York.
What type of responses do you think they get from their phone, Ross?
we've talked a lot about phones. Actually, that was a conversation I had earlier today. But that constant dopamine hit that we're getting from our phone overloads us, and actually putting that down, escaping into nature, as you say, I think is a great way to feel better.
I used to get constant calls and text messages from my boss, and I would feel like I would be, escaping the saber-toothed tiger, as they used to say, right? Sometimes there's a little bit of that stress response to where when we hear that ding, then, we hear the ding, and there's a little ding in our system too of the stress chemicals being released. And that state of elevated stress all the time, it might not be great to live in that elevated state all the time. That elevated state is special. It can help us in emergencies, but we don't want to stay there. Right. It's they call it the fight or flight versus being in a rest or digest. So it's interesting. Now, if you're in fight or flight, you're not digesting. And oftentimes they're eating, right? You're at the office and you're surrounded by all of this stress, which your body interprets as you being in danger. Mm-hmm. Now, also you're eating a bunch of, you mentioned like the sugary foods and how sometimes we can eat those sugary foods because we think that we are quelling those other feelings with those sugary foods. But I would say that we're adding insult to injury, and we're going down a path of inflammation and adrenal fatigue.
Yeah.
And
So our body is already thinking, holy cow, I'm about to get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. And then instead of fueling it with good nutrition, building blocks of life, we're actually giving it ultra processed sugars, fats, bad stuff that is giving us no nutritional value, adding to inflammation, causing possibly joint pain, brain fog, and a plethora of other things, which makes us then feel even more likely we're going to be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. It's like a negative spiral.
It's a negative spiral.
Yeah. Oh. And as you say, I think it is great advice, I think, to get out there into nature. I think in Japan, I don't remember the word, but they have its correlation is forest bathing. I don't remember the Japanese word, but they have this whole thing where people go out into nature and just feel that relaxation.
Yes, sir. The Japanese call it Shinrin Yoku, I believe. And so, like you said, it's bathing, or just if you think of it as immersing yourself in nature. And what they recommend is that you go out there and you actually touch stuff. You touch some moss, or you put your hand on a tree, maybe even take your shoes off and let your feet get in contact with the earth. And engage with your senses. Ross, have you ever heard of the term sensory anesthesia?
I have not.
Okay, so sensory anesthesia is a state where we're so inundated with so much very graphic input all the time in terms of the food, the messaging, the screens, all this stuff, that we almost become a little bit anesthetized. So we no longer appreciate the small things, like because we're eating fast food all the time, a raw almond tastes like cardboard to us. We can't really appreciate it. Because maybe, let's say, we're exposed to pornography on screens, then we don't appreciate our girlfriend, let's say, and time with them. There are a lot of very intense things that we're exposed to all the time. And so, sugary soft drinks. Have you ever told someone to drink more water, Ross, and they told you, I don't really like water?
Yeah.
Could you imagine a more preposterous thing? Like, people have just become so, I don't want to say soft, but I will say they've become anesthetized. We have gone so far towards comfort. We almost worship comfort that we've lost our appreciation for, the healthy foods, water, I mean, think about
relationships.
fresh air, right, Ross? Like, we're breathing, and that we have to do that to stay alive. But imagine holding your breath, or imagine being held underwater, even worse. Once that's taken away, you're like, wow, you have a new appreciation for something that you've taken for granted. And so I think that there's too much sensory input. We need a reset. We need, like you said, put your phone away. We need to unplug from the World Wide Web. We need to plug back into the Wood Wide Web. We need to like embrace the fact that we are a part of nature, not apart from nature. And then, people, they find remarkable improvement in doing that.
Yeah.
And so sunlight, circadian rhythms, just getting in touch with nature, it really goes a long way in combating that sensory anesthesia. And I feel like there's something to be said for gratitude. I mentioned like, if the ability to breathe is taken away, you're like, wow, I didn't realize that, I have to I have to do this thing constantly. But imagine the water thing, Ross. There's people around the world that have to go to great lengths to procure water for themselves. And if you're living in an area where you just push the button and water comes out, you lose that little bit of gratitude for having that water. And I feel like there's something to be said for being thankful.
Yeah. Do you find when you're talking to your gentlemen, they come to you for the first time, maybe they've Googled you and found you, or they've been referred by somebody, and you say, I want you to go into nature and I want you to be thankful. Do they go, what? I thought I was coming for some exercises. Like, do you get pushback? Again, the ego.
I encounter resistance.
Yeah.
Yes.
If that does happen, how do you deal with it?
Well,
and why do you think that happens?
I feel like, again, it's that ego there. Men want to feel masculine. It's my opinion that men want to feel masculine. Men consider certain things like mindfulness. Okay, I do get a lot of resistance on the mindfulness. I don't get so much resistance on the nature meditation. And so I use that actually as, like I said, as a way around the ego. I've used it with a lot of like really manly guys who were struggling with some emotional issues that they didn't want to talk about, and that's up to them. But nature is also a really good therapist, because one of the things that a good coach or a good therapist does is they hold space, and the way that you do that is by being non-judgmental, and that's what makes it safe. And nature is going to be completely non-judgmental, right? Nature just completely accepts you as you are. You can share whatever it is that you want to share with nature. But it doesn't even have to be. It doesn't have to be that mindfulness focused. Hey, if you're a fisherman, or you're a hunter, or you're someone who likes to go up to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, what I'm telling you is that it's okay to embrace the fact that you're doing that for your mental health. And one of the best ways that, like you mentioned, you asked me about my experience, and in my experience, a great way to improve your physical health is by focusing on activities that are good for your mental health, like nature meditation, like, just any kind of meditation, a little bit of breath work, right? Even the gratitude, some things that some men have a little resistance to because they consider them to not be manly. I would invite those people to put aside those preconceived notions and just embrace it as just what is, as opposed to assigning any type of good or bad or gender to it, because that's not necessary. One of my favorite questions to ask someone is just, what are you noticing? What are you noticing? Because I feel like there's great power in not reacting. You don't have to react, right? So if you can just notice something and just sit with it for a minute, then go from there. And I feel like, I feel like that's a good place to start, trying to attain what's called witness consciousness, to be able to observe and notice and not react. And like I said, then you can go from there.
Yeah, I love that. That's something that I've thought about a lot during my life, really, which is you can't control any you can control very few external things in your life, but you can always choose how you react to a situation. And that's something I talk about with my kids a lot. I talk about it with wife and friends, and I think that's a really important thing, and very similar to what you've just said there. When you are aware of something, appreciate that it is what it is. It's not good or bad. It doesn't have anything assigned to it until you assign it something, if that makes sense. Sit with it for a while and then make a more pragmatic decision. That's usually going to serve you better than rushing headlong into something and making an emotional decision. And the great example that was given to me years ago was, if it's raining outside, some people will be like, oh, I can't believe it, it's raining, terrible day, I can't do anything. But a mile down the road, there's a farmer going, yes, needed this rain. So the rain is neither good or bad. We assign good or bad to it.
We do that, Ross, and that goes back to mindset, because it's up to us how we want to look at things.
Here's a question for you then, based on what you were saying. What is your definition of masculinity?
Oh, man. Ross, I have a YouTube channel. That's that you mentioned, how could you promote me or whatever. And there really isn't much, I'm on YouTube though. So, check out my videos. And masculinity is a hot button issue. So I've tried to touch on it, just to sort of push that button. But to me, masculinity is the polar opposite of what we consider to be the feminine. And I feel like since I can't tell you what's masculine to me is only what's masculine to me, really, in my opinion. It's so. Have you ever heard of the law of gender?
The law of gender is one of the Hermetic principles.
Okay. So I'm probably not as well versed on it as you, but similar to like yin and yang, or like light and dark. Yeah. It's I feel like there's a balance of masculine and feminine energies and aspects in probably everything. And so because of that, it's very hard for me to provide a definition of masculinity. I would be interested to hear your definition of it. You caught me a little off guard. Maybe I could kind of ping pong this off you.
I think it's a fascinating subject, and I feel sorry for particularly some of the younger men in the world now, because the word masculinity seems to be synonymous with the word toxic, and somehow they've bled together. And I think young men now are particularly scared of expressing anything that some people may deem as masculine. But masculinity, I guess, for me, is that complementary opposite of the feminine. If the feminine is nurturing and creative and caring, then the masculine is confident and assertive and protective. But it doesn't have a gender for me, because both genders, or as many genders as there may be, need to exhibit both. And I think at the right times that may switch. So if a man in a heterosexual relationship has a period of turmoil in his life, then perhaps his partner embraces more of the masculine for a while to support them. And I think in a healthy relationship, you need to have both, which creates the yin and the yang, as you said. It creates a whole. So I'm not quite sure if I answered your question there, but that's kind of how I think of it in my head.
I love the way you answered the question. I thought that it was beautifully stated, Ross. That was great.
Thank you. You can have that.
Well, so from my standpoint, I'll just tell you this. I'm not one of the younger people because I feel like I aspire to masculinity. It's something that I think is a good thing. I think that it's something that should be embraced. if you have qualities about yourself that you feel are masculine, I feel like they should be embraced and explored, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it.
Definitely. We should celebrate
Should be
the
celebrated.
masculine and we should celebrate the feminine.
Should be
Neither one
celebrated.
is better. They're complementary. We definitely should be celebrating these things, I think, rather than trying to say that they're good or bad or one is better than the other. They're not. They're both necessary. The thing that kind of frustrates me a little is you hear people say that, masculinity is toxic,
Yes.
bullying and aggression. Well, they're not gender specific. Women can bully or be aggressive. So why are we saying that is toxic masculinity when we should be saying that's just a toxic behavior and it isn't tolerated regardless of who does it? But somehow it's been chucked at us guys to say this is your fault. You're the only ones capable of being a bullying, aggressive person. And it's not true.
It's not true, Ross. It's just nonsense. I can't even put too much thought into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you get your gentlemen that come to you. Some of them are more manly, as you said, and perhaps give you a little resistance. And I love the way you guide them through nature first. Do you find then they're more open to starting things like gratitude diaries and all of these other great things that can help us? Or sometimes the people just go, do you know what? I'm happy with what I'm doing right now.
The men that are very resistant to ideas such as mindfulness and gratitude and meditation, it's going to be really hard to break through that resistance. It's going to be tough to win them over. But if someone comes to you, they're like, they're looking for something, and oftentimes they're a little bit more open than when you're just stopping people cold on the street and offer and asking them to consider things, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess in exploring ways of sort of overcoming objections, I don't try to overcome objections. If someone comes to me and they want my services or they want my thoughts, I'm happy to give them to them. But I try not to steamroll people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, but fair enough. And do you have a particular program that you work with people on? Do you have like a 30-day turnaround or a 12-week program? Is it a year-long thing? What does it look like?
Well, Ross, I can give you an idea of time frames. I have people that come in to see me here in the office, and I'll charge per appointment. So people will come in one at a time. I have done programs where it's a certain number of weeks. I could give you an idea on time frames when it comes to making any kind of progress with your body. You're looking at around 6 weeks, Ross, to see any kind of real change in your body. 6 weeks bare minimum. Usually what happens around 6 weeks, maybe 10 weeks for certain people, you get that progress, you're feeling great, and then you hit a plateau. So you could be looking at maybe, let's say, if you have to do a complete body transformation, probably you're going to really have to work hard for 6 months to a year. Plan on that. Now, I can help guide someone in one office visit by just sort of providing them a framework.
Mm-hmm.
So, that framework of your mindset, meals, and movement, they can take that and run with it on their own. And from there, what they do with it, it's up to them. I have had a few manly men come to me and want specific mindfulness training. So, like, what is mindfulness? How can it be applied? Stuff like that. Breathwork is becoming more popular. People are waking up to the idea that there is this thing that they do all day long, that is breathing, that maybe they're not directing their attention to, right? You can direct your conscious attention to your thoughts, your body, or your breath. Oftentimes we don't direct our attention to those things, and there can be disastrous consequences because of that. So people have been more open to the idea of breath work. I believe a gentleman by the name of Wim Hof, he popularized a lot of the breath work stuff. This gentleman is known as the Iceman. He was involved with cold water immersion. Are you familiar with any cold water immersion? Have you done any of that?
I have, yeah. So we're lucky in the UK. We've got, I think she's the most highly trained Wim Hof instructor outside of Wim in Europe. And she lives about an hour away from me. So I've been over to the Lake District and done a few sessions with her. Emma Estrella, she's coming on this channel soon, actually, and she's wonderful. But yeah, found that very, very helpful. And the breathwork stuff I did. Have you come across clarity breathwork?
Clarity breathwork, I have not come across that.
So I came across that in Mexico a few years ago and didn't get a chance to go on any of the sessions. Came back to the UK, Googled it, and there was like 3 trainers in the whole of the UK. And one of them happened to live about 10 minutes from me. So I went and did a session with her. And it was similar to a lot of the Wim Hof type techniques. So it's a lot of quick, rapid breathing. So you change the oxygenation in the brain. But it was super powerful. Like I found myself like crying my eyes out at one point, laid on this lady's like sofa. It was incredible. Really, really amazing what the breath can do.
Would it be okay if I gave your audience a few like super easy like breathwork things that they could do?
100%, yeah.
Okay, so the first one, we'll do a 3-part presentation. The first one would be the letting go breath. And so we mentioned like that mental rumination that we sometimes have, things that we're thinking about that maybe aren't helpful. Maybe we're worried about, what's going to happen in the future. We're thinking about things that happened in the past. It might be better for us to just let those go. So now let's say that we were out in nature, right? Let's say that we were just outside and we were out in fresh air and we just took a breath, right? And then on the exhale, we just kind of picture ourselves just letting go of whatever it was that was bothering us. It's called the letting go breath. And with that, there is a little bit of visualization. And on the out breath, you just sort of picture yourself letting go of things that maybe were bothering you and aren't serving you anymore. So that's the letting go breath. And if you notice, the sort of like the therapeutic action happens on the exhale. There's a type of breathing called the long exhale. What that is just making sure that your exhalation extends to the point where you're making sure that it's longer than your inhalation. You're really focusing on that out breath. So you can do that long exhale, and you can use that in conjunction with the letting go breath, right? And what we're noticing is that, and if I could distill it down for your audience to just one super easy tip on breath work, I would say focus on the out breath. The out breath is very important. That's what takes muscular contraction. That's what takes your directed consciousness. If you are the one that's controlling your breath, which right now, because we're talking about it, people are probably, they're bringing their consciousness to their breath, but focus on that out breath. Try breathing through your nose, right? What is a lot of mouth breathing and hyperventilating through the mouth, right? Just doing that creates a state of elevated arousal in the body or a stress response. We go into that fight or flight. Through the breath, we can go from fight or flight back down to rest and digest. So the breath is a key to that. And it's also, you can think of it as an anchor, right? It's always with you. And if you get up into your head too much, if you just bring your directed focus to your breath and you slow that breath down, focus on that out breath, you can control some things that previously you felt like maybe you had no control over. What do you think about that, Ross?
Love that. I was doing it as you were saying, and you can feel yourself relax as you control your out breath. And I was thinking we've kind of gone full circle with our conversation because, we've brought it back to the saber-toothed tiger again. And all of the different elements that you're talking about, center around controlling the mindset, which then allows you to come back into this, rest or digest, where you can make better choices, whether that be with nutrition or with meal, movement, or mindset. So, I love how it's kind of like we've gone in a big circle.
Yep. That tends to happen.
So if people are watching this and they're going, I need to work with Troy, that's resonated so much. Do you only do things in your clinic, or can people work with you remotely as well? And if so,
we could set up a Zoom. We could do FaceTime. I really do like in person in the office is great. It's nice to be able to see someone. So much of what is communicated is nonverbal. So so it's nice to make that connection with a client. But yeah, I'm happy to talk to people.
Brilliant. So and you mentioned a YouTube channel, so we can.
I'm on YouTube. My YouTube channel is called Mindfully Fit, and yeah, I look forward to improving, and gotta get my production quality a little bit better there, but I do have a message, and it's therapeutic for me to get out there and get some of this stuff off my mind, because I'm always thinking about how I can bring value to people's lives. And for me, and this is something that you mentioned the last time we spoke, Ross, is like, if I could help one person, it's worth it. And that was really my goal for this podcast, that, if we can help one person, then it was worth it. And that's kind of my approach with the YouTube channel, Mindfully Fit. So check me out. And I appreciate the engagement.
Well, we'll make sure we put all of your different links on here, so to YouTube and to your clinic. So if people want to reach out, they can. This will go out across the different channels, YouTube, and to the email lists and things. But it's been a genuine pleasure. I've loved our conversation yet again. And I shall let you carry on with the rest of your day. I'll speak to you soon.
Ross, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. We'll speak soon.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Alphagenix Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss next week's episode. For more resources on Alphagenix and men's health, visit alphagenix.co.uk. Until next time.